A lush paradise filled with exotic sights and sounds from across the globe lies nestled in the heart of Memphis.
Rhinoceroses.
The Memphis Zoo and Aquarium has grown from humble beginnings with a single bear to a world-class attraction with 3,500 animals of all stripes.
It's nothing like, what it was when I was a little kid.
Join us now for a safari that begins in black and white down memory lane
This zoo is my heart. I just love it.
and brings us back to the present in stunning color and sometimes still in black and white.
It's real fun.
We'll show you how ongoing expansion has made the zoo the top family attraction in West Tennessee and how it benefits the region.
Memphis is a great city, but this makes it a real great city.
You'll get up close with the animals and their keepers.
I want them to think that animal is very, very special.
You'll see how the zoo gives researchers valuable new insights
We do close to $1 million worth of conservation work.
and helps new generations learn to respect nature.
Today we are studying insects and how they defend themselves in the wild.
So come along with us now and see why the Mid-South is wild about the zoo. I'm Rod Starnes. The Memphis Zoo traces its beginnings in Overton Park to a bear that was a mascot for a baseball team called the Turtles. And it all started near this spot more than a century ago. The legend goes that someone sent this little black bear cub to Memphis from Natchez, Mississippi as a partial payment for a shipment of shoes. The cub was nicknamed Natch and chained to a tree in his owner's front yard until the cub had too much fun in his owner's garden. That's when the Memphis Turtles adopted Natch as their mascot. Natch seemed to bring the team luck. They won the pennant during the year that Natch was with them, but as the cub grew, so did public safety concerns. So the baseball team exiled Natch to Overton Park, where he was once again chained to a tree. He became quite a popular attraction and was soon joined by a few other abandoned animals. So in 1906, the citizens of Memphis decided Natch should have more comfortable surroundings. A volunteer group donated $1,200.
And the Park Commission, which was the ruling authority for Overton Park at that time, passed a resolution to approve the habitat for the bear. And with that, the Memphis Zoo started.
Natch got a cage, and the crowds grew. And as the crowds grew, so did the zoo. The park board built the zoo's first animal building in 1907. Next was the pachyderm building in 1909 for the elephants. Then came a structure that zoogoers today will recognize as the Cat House Cafe. The Carnivora building was built in 1910 to house large cats. This structure was once home to what was perhaps the zoo's most famous resident, the MGM movie lion. And as the number of buildings increased, the collection of animals got bigger and more visitors came. In 1923, the zoo took on a little different flavor when this man became zoo superintendent. N.J. Melroy had been in the circus as a tattooed man. And 2 years after Melroy came to the zoo, he founded the first free zoo circus in the U.S., which ran until the 1960s. Melroy led the zoo for 30 years until the mid-60s. It was during that time that many native Memphians forged fond childhood memories of the Memphis Zoo.
You know, when you come to the zoo as a kid, your imagination just runs wild. You know, you felt like you were in Africa or someplace.
I think my parents rarely told us when they knew we were going because we probably wouldn't have slept the night before.
The entrance, as you approached on the right and left, you had lions, laid out on concrete. You had the polar bears, that was the first ones you saw. And then as you went around, kept going to the left, they had the sea lions.
The hippos were also a very popular attraction.
They just looked so big when they were out of the water. Most of the time you saw them, they were in the water. But if they were out of the water or if they were feeding them, and I do remember them feeding them carrots in particular, and those big mouths open and they would give them carrots.
And back then, visitors could feed the giraffes.
They would come right over and their big long tongues would come out and take food right out of your hand that you could buy out of a machine right there.
The lions and tigers in the cat house, we was just lined on the right and left with individual cages with bars, and the animals would roam around in there, and then they had just a little concrete space outside. You know, you could hear them when you were walking up roaring and stuff.
It's one of the few places you could get close to a peacock.
Your parents would think you're coming to see the animals. Of course, you wanted to play on the rides too, so it was, you know, that was just part of it.
I do remember riding the boats that were on a little, went round and round. They were on water, but they were probably the most entertaining of the rides. The pony rides were a lot of fun. If you were old enough, they didn't have somebody walk around with you. If you were young, they actually had someone lead the horses around, and it was a nice ride. They were easy to ride ponies.
It was just a great fun place, you know, and I have a lot of fond memories.
Carolyn Kingsley literally grew up at the zoo after her mom married the then zoo director Raymond Gray.
Often, Daddy Ray would bring home animals. We had different baby animals to nurse. I looked forward to the time when the announcement would come that now the zoo gates are closing, because then I could get on my bike and ride all around the zoo and check on my favorite animals, the peacocks and all the different animals that were loose in the zoo. It was just a lovely time to be a child. It was magic.
One of the big attractions at the zoo used to be Monkey Island, which housed rhesus monkeys for years. Except for 1 week in 1976. 8 monkeys escaped when the moat around their exhibit was drained for maintenance work. Throughout the years, zoo animals did get a taste of freedom on rare occasion, mostly without incident. But 2 of these monkey escape artists made headlines with some high drama at neighboring Rhodes College.
A mother and her baby had come to live on top of our library. The students began to gather, faculty. Finally, we had news cameras. It was a big old deal.
2 Rhodes students who had mountain climbing experience scaled the roof to help.
And at one point, the baby slips out of her fingers and rolls down the roof. Everyone is gasping and very upset, rushing to catch it, but it falls into a gutter, mercifully. He's fine. She continues to playfully elude capture until 2 days later on the Student Center. They finally get her to go inside. She's hungry by this time, and she comes back safely to the zoo.
For a time in the 50s and 60s, the zoo's future hung in the balance, while debates raged over extending Interstate 40 through the park. The legal case finally made it to the Supreme Court, which stopped the expressway in its tracks. That closed the book on an uncertain chapter for Overton Park and put the zoo in position for a real renaissance.
The emphasis became creating a natural exhibit, so the animals appeared as they might appear in a glimpse of an animal in the wild.
A group of concerned citizens began to formulate a plan that would bring the zoo back to life. The group took on the nickname of the Breakfast Club because they met regularly at a local restaurant.
One of the things we all said throughout this whole process was that if we're going to do this, we're going to do each exhibit as well as it can possibly be done.
And so began the campaign to free the cats.
Which I always had a fondness for, in these concrete blocks, and much like a prison. That was our first rallying cry, was to free the cats, because we felt if we could start down that road, once you've made the improvement, then people would not be satisfied to let the other animals languish in this type of environment.
So they had a plan. Next, the Breakfast Club went about raising the money.
The budget at the zoo, and at the time that I got involved, was $2.2 million, and it's a little more than $12 million now.
The entrance of the zoo also needed a new look, so plans for a spectacular entry plaza were in place to be constructed at the same time as Cat Country, which opened in 1993. This different kind of exhibit was a big change for one lion named Firecracker, who lived at the zoo for 21 years.
He was the one cat that came from the old cat house to Cat Country. And his first day out, first of all, he had no idea what grass was. He had lived on concrete his whole life, and he was just very not sure of this grass thing.
The cat's old home became the Cat House Cafe. Giving the cats a new home was only the beginning. Plans for bigger and better exhibits were in the works that included a new state-of-the-art hospital.
We have close to 3,000 animals in our care. Large and small, all of them specialized, and we need to have state-of-the-art medical facilities to take care of them.
And while the look of the zoo certainly changed to the visitors, there were also some big changes going on behind the scenes.
This is a highly professional organization who care deeply about their animals, who are highly trained, well-educated, and are completely committed to what they're doing.
The making of the modern zoo was well underway, and the best yet to come. The Memphis Zoo today is an adventure that takes you from down on the farm to the exotic culture of China, and even puts you face to face with huge polar bears, underwater no less. You can practically travel around the world in just a couple of hours without ever leaving Midtown Memphis, and the journey begins even before you enter the gates. Decorated with statues and hieroglyphics, the Memphis Zoo entrance harkens back to another time and place. You're transported to ancient Egypt, to the other Memphis, the Memphis on that other famous river, the Nile. You can splash in a replica of the Nile while you soak in the culture of Egypt. The entry plaza reminds us of our city's connection to Memphis, Egypt. The Egyptian culture was in vogue in the late 1800s, around the time Memphis, Tennessee was founded. And since our city was also on a large river, the name Memphis seemed appropriate to our founding fathers. And no other culture worshipped cats as much as the ancient Egyptians. So next we're headed to Cat Country, where exotic cats roam free in 4 acres of naturalistic environment. And the only thing between you and the cats are some moats and high-tension wires.
We have a vast collection of cats, probably one of the largest in zoos. We have one Sumatran tiger and one Amur tiger. They really enjoy their exhibit, and you'll often see them swimming when it's warm outside. The snow leopards are from around the Himalayan mountains. The meerkats are in Cat Country, they're a mongoose, and they live in a family group where actually the women control the whole hierarchy. We have a pair of cheetahs right now. You know, no matter how large the cat, whether it's a lion, whether it's a tiger, they show so much of the same behavior that your cats do at home. First of all, they sleep like 21 hours a day, and if you have a cat at home, you want to live that life. And second of all, they love to play. And we give them enrichment on a daily basis to try and bring out that play behavior much like you would at home, like giving them a ball. Any way that we can engage children, whether that's incorporating it through their relationship with their cat at home and seeing one on display, any way that we can pass on the message and teach them about wildlife is a way that they're going to protect tomorrow's resources, which is wildlife. And that's our whole mission.
More than 90,000 children come to the Memphis Zoo each year for formal or informal education programs. It's easy to get kids interested in wildlife because of their natural curiosity about animals. And the zoo education staff tries to foster that in hopes that curious kids will grow up to be good caretakers of the environment.
My name is Amber Hohen, and I'm an educator here at the Memphis Zoo. And today we are studying insects and how they defend themselves in the wild.
These 4- and 5-year-old students are taking part in a homeschool workshop at the zoo. They get to hold a cave cockroach, which defends itself in the wild by sending out a stinky smell. The children also make crafts of the animals that they study. It's just one of the many education programs here that includes summer camps and zoo snoozes, where kids get to spend the night at the zoo. And if you can't come to the zoo will come to you.
Wildlife on Wheels is a program where we actually get to take the animals out into the community. We take it to schools, nursing homes. The education department has a pretty wide variety of animals, ranging from chinchillas and hedgehogs to large snakes. We've got a 9-foot boa constrictor, we've got turkey, vulture, hawks, different things like that, porcupines. We have a good variety so we can relate it around to what the teacher is talking about. If they're doing a classroom program on rainforest animals or all birds or something like that, we can relate the animals to what they're teaching at the time. What happens with WOW is we send an interpreter out. It's about a 45-minute program. The animals come out, we tell them all about them, the kids get to touch them. They interact, like the kookaburra, we'll call them. We'll get the kids to have the kookaburra call. It's so much fun because the kids get that one-on-one interaction. They actually learn something without being lectured or being taught in the way that they do in school. Having hands-on interactions with animals actually brings to life those concepts without having to read a book. They have it right there in front of them. WOW is always changing. We're always writing new programs to go with new things, new programs that are going on at the zoo or what the teachers are teaching at that time. We're getting all sorts of new animals, ravens, we're getting some new snakes that go with our new Northwest Passage exhibit and hopefully be able to correlate that with some new programs. It's always getting bigger. We're always doing something different every day.
Being able to touch the animals really strengthens the connection that kids have with nature. But they probably don't realize that. They just know they're having fun. At Once Upon a Farm, you can pet the animals until the cows come home. It's the only exhibit in the zoo that highlights domesticated animals, and that makes it a horse of a different color. Here's one of the exhibit's keepers to give us the story straight from the horse's mouth.
Hi, I'm Jennifer Kierst. I am one of the zookeepers down at the Once Upon a Farm exhibit. And this here with me is Cleo. We also have 2 Yucatan mini pigs. We have a couple different kinds of goats. We have Nigerian dwarf goats, which are a little bit smaller than the other kinds of goats that we have. We also have Boer goats and La Mancha goats, so they're a little bit bigger and they look differently. All the goats actually have very unique personalities, and they also have unique voices. We also have 2 Jersey cattle that live next door here to Cleo. The cows are actually both very, very sweet. They're like big puppy dogs. And then we've also got 2 Mediterranean miniature donkeys. Horatio's smaller and very, very vocal. We like to keep our animals down here at the farm busy, just like the animals at the other area of the zoo. And Cleo knows what this is. This is one of the things that we use for enrichment. We just put it on the ground and she'll walk around and just push it around, and she knows how to get the treats out. You're basically allowed to pet anything that comes up to the fence and wants to interact with you, which a lot of the animals down here do. Pretty much everything down here loves to have attention. So that's a real unique experience to be able to come up and actually touch an animal, especially for a lot of kids who haven't been able to get this close to cows or to donkeys or horses before.
Once Upon a Farm also has an expo building that houses exhibits on topics such as farming and canning. That enhances the educational value of this entertaining experience. And if you're exhausted from a hard day's work on the farm, why not sit back and relax on an old-fashioned train ride around Once Upon a Farm's perimeter? If the kids want something a little more exciting, there's a ride area that will keep them entertained. And in the middle of the rides area is the zoo's animal nursery. It opened in 2004 with this little girl, a female Sumatran orangutan named Inda. The Sumatran orangutan is a critically endangered species. When Inda's mother was having trouble raising her, zookeepers stepped in.
We hand raised her. We had to pull her from her mom because she was not capable of raising. She didn't have the mother skills. So we pulled her from her mom, and we had keepers and raised her for almost 2 full years.
Hand-raising animals in need is part of the zoo's commitment to conservation. The nursery has 3 big windows, so visitors can get a glimpse into this world that previously took place behind the scenes. Inda graduated from the nursery in 2006 and moved to Houston to live with her big brother. Now, this little fella named Murphy is living high on the hog in the nursery.
We're about to feed our little Red River hog baby.
You might say that Murphy eats like a pig.
And he gets goat's milk. That's what we're supplementing him with.
Murphy is the only survivor of a litter that was born during a surprise spring cold snap. Zookeepers took him in to make sure that he was okay.
So Murphy gets fed about every 3 hours. And then at nighttime, he'll go home with one of the zookeepers, and he'll get fed about every 5 hours overnight until we bring him back in the morning.
And just like a human baby, Murphy likes to curl up for a nap after his belly is full. Creatures in the Animals of the Night exhibit are supposed to sleep during the day, but are awake for visiting hours thanks to a little trick lighting. Under the cover of man-made darkness, visitors can catch a rare glimpse of nearly 40 nocturnal species. From the dead of night to dawn's morning light, the Memphis Zoo educates, entertains, and amazes. There's a lot of monkey business going on in this next exhibit we're going to visit at the Memphis Zoo. That's because it's Primate Canyon.
I'm Nancy Charles, and I take care of the primates at the Memphis Zoo. Primate Canyon was a wonderful addition to our zoo. It was built in 1994, and so the architecture here has just been amazing, and with the natural rocks and grass, and they've all got running water, streams.
Primate Canyon features 7 exhibits containing 10 species.
That's Koga. That's our 19-year-old lowland gorilla, and male silverback, which is, they call the term silverback is when they mature to get the really silver coloring.
And there's the highly endangered Sumatran orangutans.
We have Tomback, is a male, and he's got the big cheek pouches and the throat pouch. We have a female Chickie. They are a lot of fun to watch. They're always doing something. And Tomback, his big thing is going up to the top, his tall perch up there.
And then there are the Siamangs, which are a real hoot.
It's just an amazing sound. It's something I would do in the wild too, as a kind of a territorial call, and to attract the opposite sex. They're always real popular, very, very active, very agile.
And very acrobatic. Their extra long arms help them get into the swing of things. They travel in the rainforest's treetops by swinging from tree to tree. The Siamangs at the Memphis Zoo certainly make the Primate Canyon someplace that you might want to swing by. Next, we're off on a safari to the African veldt to see animals that have been perennial favorites of zoo visitors for years. What would a trip to the zoo be without seeing the elephants? Zookeeper Andrew Smith introduces us to these peaceful pachyderms and some of the other animals in his care.
My name is Andrew Smith, and I'm the team leader of Hoofstock at the Memphis Zoo. We have 2 African female elephants here at the Memphis Zoo. Taranza is an older elephant. She's very experienced. She's the dominant elephant between the 2. They're huge. They have such unique features like the trunk and their big tusks. So people love seeing such large animals. We have 2 older rhinos. They have great personalities. They love attention. They love to be around people. We have 2 female ostriches, and right now we're in the middle of our egg-laying season, so we always get a lot of comments about the eggs. Each bird probably lays every other night. The eggs can weigh probably about 2.5 pounds or so. We have African crowned cranes over there, 4 young birds, so they're, right now their feather colors are pretty immature, but they're going to be developing into some pretty beautiful birds. They'll get a lot of red in their face and get a little taller in their crown. Their feathers on top of their head will develop. I think it's important to have exotic animals where people can come and see and appreciate what they're really like. And, you know, you don't get the perspective when you're watching a show on TV of how massive or how important or all the unique features that exotic animals have. And I think having the ability to have people come and visit zoos and see these animals gives them a different appreciation for them.
One of the greatest lessons that you can take from the zoo is an appreciation of diversity. It's almost mind-boggling to learn how animals have such unique features that are so specially adapted to their environment. Each animal is different and beautiful. That's not a lesson that's lost on a former biology teacher turned zookeeper who has worked at the zoo for more than 2 decades.
My name's Richard Meek, and these are my babies. These are my sweeties.
Richard takes care of the African hoofstock on the east end of the zoo, including the giraffes.
Basically, you can think of them a little bit like 15-foot tall cows with fuzzy horns. They're really peaceful. They like to spend a great deal of time just standing around watching the world go by, chewing cud and enjoying life. I spend 8 hours a day with them, and in some respect, I tell people it's the greatest job in the world because they pay me money to come take care of my pet giraffes. I mean, how cool is that?
And when Richard isn't taking care of his animals, he's talking about them.
I'll tell you some things you might not know about giraffes.
Every day, Richard mounts a platform with a bucket full of bananas to educate and entertain the curious crowds that gather for his daily keeper chat.
What I want them to do when they walk away from here is to realize that that is a very, very special and unique creature on Earth. From the fact that it's got the highest blood pressure in the world, to the fact that it's got the hardest kick in the world, to the fact that it can run at 35 miles an hour, I want them to think that that animal is very, very special.
Meek may be partial to the giraffe.
They're just absolutely the gentlest, sweetest, most wonderful creatures on Earth.
But he also appreciates all the other creatures under his care, like the zebras, even when they exhibit their less desirable characteristics.
Sometimes we say they can barely tolerate their own children. I mean, they just simply are grouchy animals. They're beautiful animals. The stripes very well may be to help diffuse light at night, so it makes it more difficult for lions to see them.
Also under Meek's care are the scimitar-horned oryx.
They're white, huge, long horns that are about 4 to 5 feet long and a big sweeping arc. They look like scimitars, the scimitar swords of the Middle East, and that's where they got their name.
Then there's the highly endangered bottebok.
They're the symbol of all endangered species. If you go to another zoo, you're looking at a graphic, or this zoo, and you see a small skull on the bottom corner of the graphic, it's their skull. And it means that the animal you're looking at is highly endangered.
And so Richard Meek appreciates the higher purpose of his job at the zoo.
We're managing to keep species alive. We're managing to keep a genetic diversity among species. We're benefiting the world in a particular way.
In fact, the Memphis Zoo does $1 million worth of conservation work to protect endangered species. Here's a look at those projects that help preserve the natural world.
The Memphis Zoo has always been very concerned with wildlife care. However, in the late 1990s, they recommitted themselves to conservation by adopting a new mission statement, and that was to preserve wildlife through conservation, research, and education. And over the last 6 to 7 years, we're making great strides to move away from just our fences and boundaries here at the zoo. We've really tried to look to habitat restoration, working with parks, working with reserves. We have some programs that are working with, for example, the Louisiana pine snake, one of the rarest snakes in the United States. We've reintroduced them into the wild.
They're pretty tiny.
We're also working with the endangered Wyoming toad and restoring it back to its habitat. We've been very excited about working with trumpeter swans. We've restored a large number of trumpeter swans to Iowa, and they are now breeding in the wild. There's a real need for commitment from zoos to step forth and become conservation organizations and to redefine themselves. And I think Memphis Zoo is a leader among a lot of zoos in the United States. And the things that they've accomplished for conservation of wildlife has been tremendous. We're also looking to expand our existing programs with trumpeter swans, Wyoming toads, Louisiana pine snakes, jaguars in Brazil. We're leaving no feather, scale, or fur unturned.
Another way that the Memphis Zoo serves the public is with spectacular special events. For the kids, there's Halloween's Zoo Boo, and at Christmas, Zoo Lights. And for the adults, there's Zoo Rendezvous and Safari Soiree.
The party gets bigger and better every year. Of course, it's got the best setting in the whole city to have a party. All of these bring much needed funds to the zoo and also awareness. And it kind of makes everybody feel like the zoo is part of their community.
And that community support played a vital role when the zoo embarked on one of the most ambitious endeavors in its history. Near the beginning of the 21st century, the zoo began constructing the $16 million China exhibit. The idea was to build it and try to persuade the Chinese government to loan 2 giant pandas to the zoo. Only 3 other U.S. zoos have pandas on exhibit. As endangered species, they've become like the rock stars of the animal kingdom.
One of the principal reasons that the Chinese government would give any city in the world a pair of giant pandas would be to showcase China, showcase the people. So what better way to do it than to build an exhibit that not only showcases Chinese wildlife, but showcases Chinese architecture, interprets Chinese culture, has artifacts from China, Chinese gardens. So we chose to do that, to immerse the visitor in a virtual trip through China, right here in Memphis. And that's what our goal was, not just to showcase giant pandas or Chinese wildlife, to make our visitor feel that they left Midtown Memphis and they entered China right in our portal.
So through careful design, the exhibit would replicate actual Chinese locations, architecture, and gardens. For example, the entry portal with a 50-foot Chinese pagoda was modeled on the Forbidden City in Beijing. Former Tennessee Senator Jim Sasser was the U.S. ambassador to China at the time and took the lead in negotiations.
When I was really a child, 4 and 5 years old, my mother and aunts used to bring me here to the Memphis Zoo. And I developed a special fondness and affection, indeed a bond, with this zoo at that time. And when the opportunity came to work with a magnificent, and I mean magnificent, group of Memphians to try to bring pandas here, I jumped at the chance.
It took 4 years to work out all the details, but finally, in April 2003, 2 giant pandas were put into cages in Beijing and loaded onto a plane bound for Memphis. The entire nation followed the pandas' journey and their arrival, amid much fanfare, or pandemonium, as folks called it.
My highest respect to the people of Memphis and Tennessee. So may the pandas here be the great envoys from China to the United States and to the people of this great city and great state.
Pandas Yaya and Lala soon settled into their new technologically enhanced home, along with other animals from China, including Francois langurs, white-cheeked gibbons, a pair of Asian small-clawed otters, and several species of birds.
Many of our visitors come back time and again, so they see the different changes and they learn more and more. that's what makes China such a great success, is you can come to China 5 or 6 times a year and see something new and learn something you hadn't already learned on each visit.
The arrival of Yaya and Lala also marked the beginning of research efforts at the zoo as part of a worldwide drive to save the giant pandas from extinction. That research, through a partnership with universities across the region, centers on the panda's diet.
I would consider our research groundbreaking. We've collected more data on giant panda nutrition than anyone else.
Pandas became an endangered species as their primary food source, China's bamboo forests, disappeared. Zoo researchers are already learning valuable information that may help save the pandas.
They actually eat different species of bamboo throughout the year, and they also eat different parts of the plant throughout the year. So in the spring they eat the shoots, and then as the year rolls on they switch to leaves, and then they switch to what we call the culm, which is the stem. And throughout all of that time they're actually switching the species that they eat too. They can be quite picky. So there's a lot of different factors in there, and we're trying to figure out what drives all of those changes. We are pretty confident that it has to do with the amount of protein and sugars and whatnot in the various parts of the plant, and they're just following that. But we need to prove that, scientifically. So as we work with the Chinese to go back and replant some of this stuff, we want to know what they're going to eat, and why they move and migrate. We think that they're following different bamboo stands, but we think by knowing all this information with their nutrition and why they eat certain species in different parts of the plant, we can relate that directly to the wild and hope to plant more, make bigger areas for them, so that they'll have their preferred food source in the wild and not just go blindly planting bamboo and hope for the best. And their hopes and our hopes are that we can apply all of what we learn directly to the wild and increase the numbers of giant pandas in the wild. And I really think that we can do that.
And if the panda exhibit helps visitors learn about and become more interested in conservation, then ultimately maybe more work can be done to help save other endangered species. This is the latest addition to the Memphis Zoo, Northwest Passage. It's designed to take you on a journey through the history, culture, and wildlife of the Pacific Northwest. Now, you may remember the old bear grottos that housed polar bears years ago. They were torn down when they no longer met standards for animal habitats. So the idea for this exhibit began with a dream to bring the polar bears back to the Memphis Zoo.
We originally saw polar bears out in Seattle, Washington. We could not believe how it looked. We just knew that if we could get that to Memphis, that it would be a great thing for our city.
And we said, let's make it about the First Nations people and the wildlife as it was 200 years ago in the Puget Sound.
And so the dream of the Northwest Passage came to life for visitors and for the animals. The 3.5-acre exhibit features more than a dozen animals from the American Northwest in a setting that honors the region's Native American culture. Throughout the exhibit, you see the story of Northwest Native Americans and the wildlife of the area told through graphics, architecture, and iconography.
So the rock work looks like that area, the plants look like that area, and of course the animals, polar bears, seals, sea lions, black bears, eagles, ravens, so as you walk through you see all these things.
Traditional Native American music greets you as you enter the Northwest Passage. Towering 20 feet above the entry plaza are 5 totem poles created especially for the Memphis Zoo by Native American carvers. In the Native American culture, totem poles usually told the history of the carver's family. The totem pole would be at a prominent location in the village so that visitors would know the history of the people who lived there. At the zoo, each totem pole tells a story through images of animals. The next thing you see is a cedar longhouse, like those where the nation's first people would live communally during the winter months. Inside is a classroom overlooking the Sea Lion Amphitheater, where visiting students can get up close with the sea lions swimming at their feet. The amphitheater seats 500 people in a setting similar to the sea lion's rocky coastal home. The pool holds 180,000 gallons of salted and chilled water for some very happy sea lions.
Sea lions are also very playful by nature, and they now have a pool that's roughly 3 times the size that they're old in, so they're just going crazy.
Every day, the sea lions make a big splash for the crowd.
We have 3 sea lion shows a day too, where a keeper comes out and trains the animals and talks to the public about, tells them a little bit about the natural history of the animals, but also does a little entertaining educational show to let people learn a little bit more about them.
And did we mention that they do tricks? And you may be wondering why sea lions are so easy to train. Well, first of all, they're athletic. They're smart and eager to learn. And most of all, they like to eat fish. Lots of fish. The trainers use what's called operative training to get the sea lions to do tricks. If they do something the trainer asks them to do, they get a fish. It's entertaining for the audience, but also very important to the sea lion's health. It allows the keeper to check out the sea lions to make sure that each one is okay.
Look, there he goes.
You can get an even closer look at the sea lions in the underwater viewing area. But don't blink. These guys can swim really fast, up to 20 miles an hour. On the other side of the underwater viewing area from the sea lions is the huge polar bear exhibit that's home to 3 huge polar bears that have lots of room to play.
Polar bears are amazing animals. They're all in the 600-pound range. The male is going to be closer to 11 or 12 when he's grown. So people look at him now and say, holy cow, he's going to be twice the size.
The male's name is Peyton. Those are the 2 ladies, Cranberry and Haley. They're best friends. They sleep by each other and share their food.
They're very playful. They're naturally very inquisitive. They're very curious and they're fearless. So that combination makes them very fun to watch. I mean, you can throw, toys and barrels and stuff in the water, and they just go crazy because they're not afraid to just jump right in there and play.
And perhaps they're so playful because the polar bears like their surroundings. The sign of a well-designed exhibit is that the animals do things that they would do naturally in the wild, which is exactly what the polar bears are doing when they put on a show for the crowd. It's no wonder they're so happy. The Memphis Zoo went to great lengths to make these polar bears feel pampered.
The polar bears have a 130,000-gallon pool. The water's chilled to 60 degrees. There's lots of shade. There's even rocks that are refrigerated. So the animals are going to be comfortable even in Memphis summers.
There are so many different vantage points from which to see the polar bears. The rocky side, where the bears might get a good whiff of you, or this window, where you can get a good look at them both above and below water. But the best seat in the house is the underwater viewing area at feeding time.
Love the polar bears. Yeah, they were cool. She enjoyed watching them come up out of the water and dive back down. It's fun.
Most of the time they will try and hold the ball underwater, but it'll make them float up to the top and then they'll turn over sideways.
Twisting and turning and jumping and pushing up against the glass. They seem to like the kids. They'd get right up to the glass with their face.
Just around the corner live 3 North American black bears that are small in comparison to the polar bears.
You walk through the exhibit and you see polar bears, which are so huge, but then you walk through and see these black bears that look, I've heard people refer to them as babies, but really they top at about 200 pounds. So they're a good contrast to see a good different kind of bear, and it's a bear that's indigenous to all over the United States.
A walk along the back edge of the exhibit takes you back in time.
The fishing village facade at the north end of the exhibit is a replica of a photograph of a fishing village on the Puget Sound in the 1890s. And we said, wouldn't that be great to recreate that fishing village?
After you've encountered the animals and admired their beautiful environment, this majestic Indian chief has a final message for you.
Chief Seattle was one of the Northwest Coast Indian chiefs around the turn of the century. And the U.S. Army was taking over a lot of lands from the native people, and he was asked to sell his land to the Army. And he replied in a speech, I think it was a written speech, and that speech has been interpreted many ways.
Chief Seattle told Congress in that famous speech that he couldn't sell the land because he didn't own it. He didn't own the land or the sky or the water or the animals. He was the steward of the land to protect it for his children and their children. The chief's conservationist messages are carved in stone throughout the exhibit. It's a message that the Memphis Zoo hopes you'll keep long after you leave the Northwest Passage. The zoo has certainly come a long, long way since its beginnings at the turn of the 20th century, and it still has an exciting journey ahead. As you can see, there's still lots of room for expansion in Overton Park.
You know, we've only utilized 40 of our 70 acres, so we have many hopes for things to happen that are good in the future.
Plans are already in the works for building new exhibits to house new animals.
We're going to build a grizzly facility that's going to have grizzly bears in an open air setting, and we're also going to have timber wolves and the waterfowl and creatures that frequent the Yellowstone Basin. So that's an exciting new project on the horizons here at the zoo. We also plan to build an exciting new Zambezi River hippo camp for our hippos, where you'll be able to see hippos at the zoo, both above the water and underwater. You'll be able to see them run across the bottom of what looks like a natural river bottom. We'll also have crocodiles in that exhibit. We'll have okapi, which is a forest giraffe. We'll have a treetop classroom where we can teach classroom activities. We will have flamingos, which are very prominent in the Zambezi River Delta, where you see them on the salt flats. So that's going to be an exciting new addition.
While the look of the zoo will continue to evolve, and the collection of animals may vary, two things that are almost certain not to change anytime soon are the zoo's commitment to wildlife education and conservation, and the Mid-South's commitment to support its favorite family attraction.
The zoo is just a wonderful place for everybody to come to.
And so what began as the story of a single black bear is now the story of flocks of fowl, herds of hoofed animals, schools of fishes, and generations of humans, Mid-Southerners who were and always will be wild about the zoo.